Hello everyone and welcome to a new lecture. In this video we're going to talk about public key cryptography. So in the previous lecture we talked about a type of encryption that is called symmetric encryption, and basically in symmetric encryption what happens is the person who's sending the communication, they have to have a key. So using the key they will encipher or they will encrypt a message, and the person who is receiving the message, they have to have the same key, okay, for them to be able to decrypt the message. So the person who's sending the message and the person who's receiving it, or the person who is encrypting the message and the person who's decrypting it, they both have to have the same key in order for the process to happen. Okay, so our model was like this. We have our usual actors. We have Bob and Alice. So Bob, suppose that he has a lock and a key. This lock right here can represent any type of symmetric ciphering. So we had Skittle, or for example we have transposition cipher or substitution cipher. This lock represents that, and the key represents the key such that the ciphering with it happens. Okay, so suppose Bob wants to send Alice a message. So using symmetric encryption, what has to happen is Bob will put a lock on the document or on the communication. Basically, he will encrypt it, he will send the message, and Alice right here somehow has to get this key. Without this key, which Bob used it in order to encrypt the message, Alice will not be able to decrypt the message. Okay, and we saw that there is limitation, or there are limitations with this method, because physically Bob has to get Alice the key. Okay, if someone in between intervenes with this transaction or communication and finds out what the key is, then the encryption will have no use because the content of the message will be known. Okay, so symmetric encryption, I want you to know this, symmetric encryption is about the key, is about both parties having the same key in order to encrypt the message and in order to decrypt it. Okay, so Alice somehow has to get the key in order to decrypt the message. So how can we stop sending our key that we used in order to encrypt a message to the person who's receiving it? Okay, well, that's where public key cryptography or asymmetric encryption kicks in. So what is public key cryptography? It's the same thing. Public key cryptography is a type of asymmetric encryption. Basically, public key cryptography is a type of cryptography such that the actor has two keys. Okay, he or she has a public key which is known to everyone and a private key which is only known to the actor, him or herself. So let me show you what I mean by this. So we have our usual actors. We have Bob and Alice. They both have locks and they both have keys. So these locks that you can see, these are a type of encryption, and the key is the key in order to encrypt or decrypt the communication. There is one important thing that you should know. So Bob has a lock and he has a key. This lock and this key, they are related. Okay, so in public key cryptography, as we mentioned in the definition, you have two keys. You have one key that is public, you have one key that is private. By public, what I mean is everyone can see it. Okay, everyone has access to it. And by private, I mean only the person who has the private key, only that person has access to that particular key. No one else has access. Okay, so why is this important? Suppose Bob wants to send Alice a message, okay, using public key cryptography. What he can do, since he has access to a lot of public keys, he can request Alice's public key. Okay, because it's public, everyone has access to it. As we mentioned, everyone can see it. Okay, in symmetric encryption, as we saw previously, no one has to have access to the key except the two people who the encryption and decryption happens between them. However, in asymmetric encryption, the public key is public to everyone. Everyone can see it. Okay, so what Bob does in order to send Alice a message, so this is the message and Bob wants to send this particular message to Alice. He will request or he will take Alice's public key. I'll repeat it because her public key is public. It's known to everyone. So he will request Alice's public key. He will encrypt the message using Alice's public key, and then he will send Alice the message. Okay, so now only Alice will be able to access the message and decrypt the communication. Okay, so I hope you see this, how public key cryptography happens. So what Bob did, Bob asked for Alice's public key because it's public and everyone knows about it. He encrypted the message with it and then he sent it back to Alice. Since Alice has the key in order to unlock or to decrypt the message, only Alice will be able to read the message. Okay, so here we don't have a key that both Bob and Alice depend on. However, Bob requests Alice's public key, which is public, known to everyone. He will encrypt a message with it and send it back to Alice. And since Alice has the private key, which is associated with the public key, only that particular private key is associated with the public key, then she will be able to decrypt the message. So if someone in the middle intercepts the message and gets the message which is encrypted using Alice's public key, they will not be able to decrypt the message since they don't have the private key. Only Alice has the private key. Okay, so that's why public key cryptography is way more secure and safer than symmetric encryption. Okay, so suppose again Alice wants to send the file to Bob. So even if we have an eavesdropper, here we have Eve and she listens to communications. So what Alice will do, Alice will request Bob's public key because it's public, it's known to everyone. So Alice will request Bob's public key. Even if Eve intercepts that, she will not be able to do anything with it. Okay, because even if she got the encrypted message using Bob's public key, she will not be able to decrypt it since she does not have the private key. Only Bob has the private key. Okay, so the private key that is associated with this public key, only that person who has that private key will be able to decrypt the message that is encrypted using that particular public key. So Alice will request Bob's public key. She will encrypt a message with it and she will send it back to Bob. So here, even if Eve intercepts the message, she will not be able to do anything, as we mentioned. Since she does not have this red key, she does not have Bob's private key. Only Bob has the private key. So the message will be received to Bob securely, and since Bob has the private key that is associated with the public key, which Alice encrypted the message with, then he will be able to look at the message and read it or decrypt it. That is the whole idea of asymmetric encryption or public key cryptography. So in modern day computers or in communication, we have a lot of actors, okay, and they each have a private key and a public key. The private key that they have is associated with the public key that they have, okay, and what they do, they will put their public key somewhere that everyone can see it, okay. We call them servers. So they will put their public key in a server. So suppose this guy wants to send this guy a message securely. Okay, how can he do it? So suppose he wants to send a message to this guy. How can he do it? Well, first he has to get his public key. Okay, this is this guy's public key. He will get it, he'll encrypt the message with it, and then send it back to him. Okay, since only him or only this actor has the private key which can decrypt the message, then only this person is able to read the message and understand it. So if he wants to send this girl or this actor a message, he will request her private key, which is this one, and encrypt a message with it and then send it back to her. Since she has the private key, she will be able to decrypt the message. So suppose this guy wants to send eavesdropper or Eve a message. If he requests another person's public key, so he will encrypt a message using this white key. This white key belongs to himself. Okay, so let's change it. He will use this red key. If he encrypts a message using this red key and send it back to Eve, she will not be able to decrypt it because Eve has a different private key. The private key will not be able to decrypt the message, okay? She will be able only to decrypt the messages that are encrypted using her only public key, okay? So I hope the idea of public key cryptography is clear. So on a server, we have copies of our public keys, we have a lot of copies, so a lot of people can send us messages. So that's why a lot of people can send you emails, because they will request your public key, they will encrypt the message with it and send it back to you. Since you only have the private key, you will be able to decrypt the message. Okay, so again, that is the whole idea of public key cryptography. So let me show you in reality. So in reality, we don't have keys and we don't have locks like here. This is just an illustration. In reality, this is what a public key and a private key looks like. So first of all, this is a message, as you can see right here. This is a message that is encrypted, okay, using a public key. This is an example of a private key. As you can see, it does not look like a lock. It's just gibberish. However, it's letters, and based on mathematics. It's based on number theory, and I'll show you in the next lecture how the public key and private key is generated. And here is an example of a public key. This key right here, it's on a server. Everyone can see it. If someone wants to send you a message, they will request this public key. Okay, this public key is associated with the private key. This is just for example. If they want to send you a message, they will request this public key, encrypt a message with it, send it back to you. Okay, you will receive something like that. It will be gibberish. And then, since you only have the private key that is associated with the public key, you will be able to decrypt the message. Okay, so just to make it clear, suppose this is a message, you want to send it to Alice. Okay, you want to introduce yourself. So if you want to do that, you have to request Alice's public key. Okay, so this message added to the public key or Alice's public key, you will get a encrypted message. You will get something like that. And then what she receives is the encrypted message. Since she has the private key, so this message added to the private key, you will get the plain text. Okay, you will get the text that Bob wanted to send you. You will be able to decrypt the message that was encrypted using the public key. So I hope the idea of public key cryptography is clear, and I hope you understand that in asymmetric encryption, we have more than one key. We have a public key that is known to everyone, and we have a private key that is known only to you. The private key and the public key, they are mathematically related. Okay, so if someone encrypts a message using your public key, only you are able to decrypt it because you only have the private key. And if someone wants to send you a message, they're not gonna encrypt the message using their own public key. They're gonna encrypt it using your public key, send it to you, and then you're gonna decrypt it using your private key. And with this, we come to the end of this lecture.